Have you ever felt that gentle nudge telling you there's something more? That the path you carefully planned might not be the one that you're meant to take? I'm Marissa Switzer, and this is If I Hadn't Said Yes, Stories of Surrender and the Pursuit of Purpose. Each week, I sit down with women who have trusted their journey, stepped into the unknown, and discovered their true calling along the way. Whether you're feeling called to make a change or simply seeking inspiration from others who have taken the leap, this is your invitation to explore what might be possible if you say yes. Hi, Ariel. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really excited about doing this.
Me too. So we went to college together. It's so funny thinking back to that moment. Like it was an anthropology class, right, that we were in. I would love to hear from you when you were in that moment. What did you think that you were going to do with your life, or what was your plan for your life then?
Oh wow, let's take it back.
Yeah.
Take it back. Yeah. So in college, I studied anthropology and Spanish, and I had really had my mind set on joining the Peace Corps.
Oh, wow.
And so my entire life up until that point was oriented around preparing me for that. That was like my big dream.
Wow.
So, from what I studied to the extracurriculars I was involved in, I did a lot in the local schools
Yeah.
around the university. So, I got certified in mentoring and youth development. I was very involved in the community. And that's what I was pursuing. I thought I was going to join the Peace Corps somewhere, in a Latin American country to use
Wow.
my Spanish degree. I thought I was
Yeah.
working in youth development and just making an impact in those communities. So that was the plan at the time.
Yeah. What happened that made you feel like that wasn't the path that you were meant to stay on?
Yeah. So let's bring it back again. Around 2017, I'm like a year out of college. I was a program coordinator at the university doing like a youth development program, everything lined up.
Yeah.
And I was still on that path. And really, what changed it for me was, it's like the cliche saying, every rejection is a redirection.
Hmm.
Essentially, I applied for the Peace Corps and I was rejected.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I didn't get in. And, at the time, it was very devastating. It was disorienting. Like I said, it was how I had oriented my whole life up until that point. But the layer deeper of that story is that behind the scenes, um, I was also struggling a lot with alcohol use, substance abuse,
Mm.
um, very much caught up in the party girl scene and the party girl persona. And so I worked at that position as a program coordinator. I also on the weekends and at nights, because it didn't really pay very much, I was a waitress
Yeah.
at a sports bar at the university as well. And so if you've ever worked in service industry, that is not the environment you want to be in if you
Yeah.
struggle with drinking, partying, and drug use. So anyways, long story short, I had all of these other things going on that clearly now seeing myself, I was not ready for that type
Mm.
of commitment. I was not ready to go 2 years abroad, uh, away from everything. It's a very emotional and stressful scenario to be in and isolating. I
Yeah.
did not have the emotional regulation maturity that I would
Wow.
have needed to be able to do it. And then I was also struggling with all of those other things. So I hadn't put that dissonance together though. I was kind of just operating and living these two separate lives. I knew deep down that something didn't line up. I knew deep down I felt like I was disappointing myself and not living up to my potential.
Mm.
And, something wasn't quite matching.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until actually getting the no, actually getting the rejection letter that forced me to look at those gaps and address it and actually make a change. That is what ultimately led to like my first big yes after that. But I needed the reality check first. And
Wow.
that's what that rejection gave me.
Yeah. That's incredible that it almost gave you the positioning to like reevaluate, because some would think that when you're rejected, if your identity is so wrapped up in this thing that you thought you were going to do for the rest of your life. I mean, I can relate to that. If you're rejected, some people could say, okay, well, you could have leaned heavier into like the hard stuff, the bad stuff,
Oh,
but it's great that it really made you take a look. What do you think was it that made you look at what can I do? What positive change can I make from here?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think it comes down to that deep down, I knew that I wanted to have a positive impact in the world. I've always felt a deeper calling. I've always felt like I wanted to be a change maker and do something positive with my life. And so I think it was just like a coming back to terms with that and coming back to that deeper calling and value that motivated me to make the change and not go in the other direction
Yeah.
because I think sometimes I don't even give myself credit for that. I could have very well took that and just totally spun down another road.
Yeah.
I didn't. And so I do think it was like that deep innate desire to have purpose and make meaning of my life that encouraged me to take the other route.
That's awesome. So, in order to say yes to what came next, what did you have to start saying no to?
Well, I had to say no to a lot actually, because the big yes was that I ultimately decided to move across the country,
Mhm.
move out of the environment that was really not serving me. And so I had to say no to what I was used to, which
Yeah.
was friends being around me, family being around me, happy hours,
Yeah.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. I had to say no to what was comfortable and what I saw a lot of my other people around me doing, friends doing. Um, in that state, I feel like people tend to stay in that area,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like for generations. And so saying no to that kind of traditional path yeah, I had to say no to all of that in order to
Yeah.
say yes to literally uprooting my life and starting fresh.
Yeah. Once you decided to make that move, and just for like reference, we're from New Jersey. And I
Yeah.
feel like because a lot of people are either Italian or Hispanic or like very family oriented where you don't move away from home. So once you decided to take yourself out of there, how did you figure out what next step to take?
Yeah, it was a brick by brick type of experience. I knew when I was moving that I wanted to live somewhere sunny. I knew I wanted to live somewhere warm and pick a place that felt like the life I envisioned. So that ultimately ended up being Florida. I happened to be somewhat familiar with the area because I had lived there briefly for a few years
Okay.
growing up. So I was like, okay, I kind of get the vibe. Um, but I had no idea what I was doing. I went down there without a job, without knowing anyone there
Hmm.
currently, and funny enough, without even having my apartment secured yet.
Wow.
I remember we were driving, it was me and my partner at the time, and we hadn't officially gotten like our welcome letter into our unit. So we're like,
Wow.
cross, hopefully they let us in the doors.
Right.
Um,
Wow.
and that kind of, it was just, you know, repeated steps and yeses, and then each time kind of building more of that self-trust to make those choices moving forward.
Yeah.
We got there. I waitressed at the time to just kind of until I found my footing and found I was what I was going to do,
Yeah.
right? And it really was the starting of my healing journey, my health journey, which I'm sure we'll get into how like that
Yeah.
kind of leads into what I do now. But it started with me and going on that self-exploration and prioritizing my health, healing my relationship with alcohol, with substances, really
Mm,
getting to the root of all that.
yeah.
But that's where it started. That was like the catalyst.
Yeah. I love that you brought up self-trust because I feel like making the decision and pulling yourself out of that situation and then also having to make all these smaller decisions of what am I doing next in my life? I'm sure that helped build self-trust of like, look what I did and look what I can do to take myself out of these situations.
Oh yeah, and that sticks with me too till today. I feel like now one of my superpowers is like you could drop me anywhere around the world with nothing, and I feel very confident I could figure it out.
Yeah.
So that really does build like an unshakable self-trust and confidence. So it didn't feel like that at the time, but I am, grateful for that now.
Yeah. So what unexpected doors started to open after you made that move that led you to what you do now?
So many. So I really wanted to start being fit. I've always kind of been drawn to like fitness and health to some degree, but I was like, okay, I'm making this big change. I want to join a gym and a fitness class. And so I started going to this gym almost every day because it felt like, I don't know, just one thing. It honestly felt like a distraction at the time from temptations I was having of like
Yeah.
old patterns of behaviors and old ways. So it did kind of become that safe space.
Yeah.
But fast forward a year going to that gym, I was the strongest and most fit I had ever been. I was like a weapon. I was like, it was incredible. And there was a coach there that was like, Ariel, I think you would make a really great coach.
Yeah.
Would you want to like join the team? And so I was like, okay, sure. Right. Like
Yeah.
I had no experience in the health and fitness industry. I didn't have any credentials at the time. I never worked with clients at all,
Yeah.
especially in that way. But she was like, we'll train you, we'll get you, set up, we'll get you feeling confident. And so I started working at a kickboxing studio. And that was like my first introduction into the health and fitness space. And from there, my passion just grew. I really loved health and fitness and the way that it positively transformed people's lives.
Yeah.
Um, you could see people, yes, physical transformations, but their mood, their mindset, their emotional well-being, you could see them every time they would come in, they would be happier, right? And
Hmm.
like when they left, they would be happier. And I just liked seeing that on the ground shift in
Yeah.
people. And so it kind of just rippled from there where I was like, okay, I'm going all in on this. I want,
Yeah.
to be in the health and fitness industry. So I started working as a personal trainer. I got certified in PT. Um, and then the pandemic happened.
Hmm.
And so that kind of led to my second big yes, if you will. I think probably for a lot of trainers, we had to pivot
Yeah.
because all of our business was in person. And I decided to start my own online health and fitness coaching business.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to go back to the moment where they asked you to become part of the coaching staff. Did you feel like you had an inkling that that was something you wanted to do next, or do you feel like she saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself at the time?
She saw something in me for
Yeah.
sure. Like I had never considered that prior at all.
Yeah.
I was having fun. Like I was having so much fun, like testing my limits, seeing what my body was capable of. I thought all of the challenges and workouts were cool. Like I was just
Yeah.
having a great time. And she definitely saw something in me. We're still close to this day,
Oh,
me
good.
and that woman, her name's Kelsey. And I always credit her. I'm like, you got me started in this industry.
Yeah. That's
Um,
amazing.
but when she said it, when she asked, I was lit up. And
Mm.
for me, it felt like a full body, like nerves, of course, a little bit, but I was
Yeah.
so excited by the idea. So
Yeah.
to me, that's always a sign in my body where I'm like, okay, this is a
Is that yes?
this is a yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So, once you said yes to starting your own business, I guess, what did that journey look like? I mean, that's the most unconventional time to start a business and for it to be something that you're still doing today. I'm grateful that you had a good experience doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because what got me thinking about it again was actually someone else coming to me. Um, so I had a client that had moved away, and she just, at the time, I think I was experimenting on Instagram a little bit, kind of
Okay.
just posting fitness content, again, just for fun
Yeah.
at the time. And she had reached out to me and was like, hey, I really like am needing help with my health and fitness. I just moved to this new town. I don't know anyone. Have you ever considered online coaching?
Hmm.
And I was like, huh, no, but yes, sure, I can
Yeah.
help you with this. And literally, again, had not thought about this really much at all before, had nothing at the time to really offer,
Yeah.
like tangibly. But again, it was like I trusted the yes and the feeling of excitement from having that opportunity proposed to me. And I was like, I can figure this out.
Hmm.
And so she was my first client. I really like bootstrapped the first program. Like, I mean, like the systems that go along with it, the
Yeah.
application, the how I was going to deliver the programming, like all of the, structure and systems. I just Googled
Yep.
everything
Yeah.
um, and just, figured it out. But that was kind of the start into it. And then, learning as I went
Yeah.
was really it. I had, of course, like some mentors and some people that I looked up to or who were also kind of getting into the entrepreneurial space, found some communities of
Yeah.
support to like help with some of that stuff. But yeah, that was the genesis of it all.
Yeah. Do you think that like your openness to really just kind of sitting in like, okay, I moved. I don't know what's next, but I'm open to it. Do you think that is what kind of attracted these people to see in you what you didn't see in yourself and just open these doors?
It's a good question. I guess I'll never concretely know what it was, but I do think I am very heart-led. I am very passionate when I'm onto something.
Yeah.
I think it's hard for me to hide it,
Yeah.
and I think that energy does pass on to people.
Yeah.
So potentially that, but I am grateful, whatever it was that, I mean, whether it was, yeah, them or a deeper calling that I have always had, I just hadn't realized for myself.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it.
Very cool. So let's talk about your next big yes, because you've just had a lot in a row over the last decade. So after you started your business, obviously COVID was happening, you started online coaching.
Yeah.
I know that your next big yes was to move to Bali. And how did that come about?
Yeah, okay. So as I'm sharing this too, a lot of the yeses also had a it's interesting, also had like a pre-no.
Mm,
Um, so how Bali came about was I was in this long-term relationship
mhm.
for 6 years. This is the person that I had moved to Florida with
Yeah.
and things. And that was no longer a yes.
Mm,
And that was really, really hard for me, both of us, I'm sure. But ultimately deciding to separate, to end that relationship. Mind you, again, this was a vision I had, right? For
mhm.
6 years, this was a vision I held to be with this person, a future,
Yeah.
a identity of myself and who I was in the world.
Yeah.
So it's a big life shattering event sort of happening. I'm in
Yeah.
this disorientation, a little bit lost, not sure what's going on.
Yeah. It's like you finally found your footing and then this
Right,
happens. Yeah.
right, right. And again, I think when I think about intuition and kind of my yeses too, I think everyone is intuitive and has intuition, but we kind of receive it a little bit differently.
Mm,
Mine comes to me like a very clear knowing.
mm,
It's almost like a download. I don't even know where I get the idea, but there's no like contemplation, there's no questioning, there's no indecision. I just remember like having the thought and then immediately taking steps to making it happen.
wow.
So essentially, we separated. I was thinking a little bit of like, okay, now what, Ariel? What are we going to do next? What do we want?
Mm,
And I've always had the deep desire to live abroad, going back to Peace Corps, right? Like
yeah.
I liked that concept of living in another country, immersing myself in that culture and
Yeah.
community. So it was kind of like that coming back to me of like, okay, this is our time. And so I did a little bit of research here and there, and Bali came into my sphere. Someone kind of recommended it to me, like, hey, you should check out this town. I looked it up, really cute beach surfing town, active living, sun,
Yes.
tropical, spirituality, like all of the things. And I was like, okay, I guess this is where I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
Originally, the plan was like 3 months to just explore, kind of go on my, I guess, eat, pray, love journey, which I can't even remember if at the time that was out or big yet, but it
Yeah.
it was resemblant to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Was it in the middle of the pandemic that you went?
no, it was like maybe a year after.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I had to quarantine when I got there for like 7 days. And there was still a lot of red tape to get and go anywhere. So it
Yeah.
was like right when it was coming to an end and things were still a little bit, wonky.
Yeah.
Um,
Where were
but
you at in your business when you decided to make that move?
I was in a place where I was doing well in terms of I felt like I knew who I was as a coach and what I was offering,
Yeah.
but I was still rocky with systems
Mm.
and consistent like marketing flow,
Okay.
like that consistent traction of clients
Yeah.
coming for.
Yeah.
I didn't always necessarily know when or if new clients were going to come. My
Yeah.
strength when I had a client, they tended to retain and
Good.
stay for a
Good.
while. So
Yeah.
that was like gave some stability, but I was still figuring it out for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
Went there with the intention for 3 months and ended up staying for 2 years.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
Wow. I just remember seeing, like, I know that you had a gym that you went to regularly there, and it seemed like you grew a really great community into, I know you said like you have this special talent now of being able to drop yourself anywhere in the world and figure it out, but it really seemed like you thrived in community there.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of felt like I had to,
Mm.
because again, you don't know anything or anyone. The second day that I landed, I knew I was going to go join a gym.
Yeah.
And I had picked out that gym already because I just knew that certain gyms they have good community base like CrossFit gyms.
Yeah.
I just knew that they tend to create good communities, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna plug myself in there
That's smart.
as just a place to start. So that was really helpful, definitely.
Yeah. What did Bali give you in terms of self growth, in terms of business growth? Like, what did you learn by living there?
Oh my gosh, so much in terms of self growth. It initiated me in so many ways, even deepening that self trust even more. But also, self love feels too cliche, but that's the only thing I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I had found a health and fitness community, it was also extremely isolating.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize that you're literally across the world on this island. You're in a totally different time zone. So everyone, everything back home is on a completely different day.
Yeah.
Like lining up for calls or talks, or you just feel like your lives are separate. It just
Yeah.
feels totally different. And then Bali is just like this adult dreamland. You feel like you're in a dream every day. It's incredible. And so I did spend a lot of time alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is a lot of growth and maturity that happens in solitude, a lot of self-reflection. I developed like a deep understanding of who I am, what I like, what I don't like, what I stand for. It amazes me today sometimes when I will talk to women and they're like, I'm so afraid to just like eat dinner by myself, like go to a restaurant and eat dinner by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it worked that muscle really well. Where again, I'm like, I'll go to dinner by myself. I'll take myself to a cafe. I'll take myself on a little, vacation. Out of necessity, you get really comfortable in your own thoughts, in the inner landscape of your own mind. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Um, and then from a business perspective, it taught me that when to let go.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, when I was living there, and then also kind of grieving and mourning the end of that relationship, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really realize how in it I was until after, but I was in a lot of grief and still working through it. Business started to feel hard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to say that it wasn't hard before, because it is hard work, but it literally felt like I had to force myself to just show up.
Yeah.
Things that used to light me up and excite me, like creating content and being on video and speaking with clients and doing all of those things, it felt like so hard, like pulling teeth,
Exhausting. Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I just had so much of this resistance and it was confusing.
Mm.
It was confusing because, like I said, it used to be so, it used to light me up and used to feel so fun. And so I had to really kind of decide that I was going to let go of my business and let it die. And again, trust that from the death would come a rebirth. Spoiler alert, obviously there did.
Mm-hmm.
But in the moment, it again feels like things are crumbling. It feels like uncertainty, right? Like
Yeah.
you just don't know. Cliff Notes version of what I took away from that 2 years, there's so
So
much in
much.
that,
Yeah.
but those would probably be like the biggest from a personal and from a business perspective.
Yeah. So, and you said earlier, like, self-love or self-care kind of feels, um, shallow or however you said it. But when you say that you were still existing in that grief, I almost feel like everything you learned in being on your own and like learning how to be alone with yourself, like that is self-care, self-love, just repairing the things that you had either forgotten or never really built as someone who was dependent on someone else for 6 years.
100%.
Yeah.
It was I had associated this person and this life with home,
Yeah.
and I had to create that home in myself again, that safety in
Yeah.
myself again, that stability in myself that I had outsourced for 6 years to this partner.
Yeah, that's a great point. As someone who's also like moved away from everything she knew as home, how did you create that home in a new place without that person? And
Mm,
home in that, obviously Bali, you weren't going to stay there forever. And we'll talk about why you or how you decided to leave. But how do you create that home again in
yeah,
another new space?
yeah. It's has nothing to do with out there or the external, and all to do with the internal home that you create in yourself. And so going back to deeply understanding my needs, my wants, my desires, and need and owning these things without shame or guilt or feeling like I was needy for having these needs
Mm-hmm.
or wanting these things or like I was too much for having these desires, and then creating a deep sense of safety and stability
Mm.
in myself too. And um, it's easier said than done.
So I guess tell me what started to shift in you that you felt like it was time to leave Bali.
Yeah. So similar to what drew me there, I had a same experience of a download and a knowing that it was time to go back. So when I was there and I kept extending my visa and staying, I kind of would just tell myself, like, I know when it's time, when it'll be time to go back. It doesn't feel like it's time yet. And I was actually on a little like solo trip there. I had booked this beautiful little beach bungalow by the water for myself just for the vacation for the weekend. And I just remember feeling really sad.
Mm,
And like there was layers of my healing that I was no longer able to do in Bali.
mm,
Um, I had to go back home. I had to address some of the things that maybe I had distracted from or put off when it came to my healing and grieving from that relationship specifically.
mm-hmm,
And I don't know if I was, I tend to think that life will reveal to us learnings when we're ready,
mm-hmm.
when we're emotionally ready to hold it, right? So I don't know, this is maybe a little bit off topic, but when people suppress certain traumas and then they will slowly start to get some of those memories back.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the teachings or research around that is that the person might have not had the capacity to deal with that trauma at the time. And
Yeah.
so it will suppress it until the person is ready. So
Yeah.
I kind of see it in a similar vein. And I guess I was ready at that time to really face all of that. And so I felt again that deep download and
Mm-hmm.
call of like it's time to go home. And so I started getting my things in order and set up to go back to the States.
Wow. So when you did come back, how do you then, I know, like you said, you kind of had to face maybe a reality without that partner in the same town or same place that you lived before. How do you start to make a new home for yourself separate from that?
Yeah, it was really hard, Marissa. I'll just be like completely honest. It involved, and this is going to sound maybe counterintuitive, a lot of feeling my feelings, like
Yeah.
on the bathroom floor, crying,
Yeah.
hurting, in pain, facing that pain. But again, when you go through the depths of your grief or the depths of whatever that difficult emotion is, and you do come out on the other end, there's you.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get there unless you go through the hard. And so, as painful as it was, I realized after that, one, I survived. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still here. I've got me. We're alive. We've got like a roof over our heads. Like we're okay. So, from an emotional internal standpoint, that's how, I was able to recreate a home. In the, outer world. It
Yeah.
looked like, okay, I've got all this experience about what I like, what makes me happy, what things I want in my environment. I know I am definitely a beach bum. I need to be by the beach. I want to be in warm weather. I want to wake up and see palm trees
Yeah.
like my window. These are my needs. These are my desires. And so being very intentional about where I was going to be looking for apartment, what town I was going to be in. Was it a town that offered, like, had really awesome gym communities and run clubs and things that were walkable? Yes, these were
Yeah.
all like heavy yeses for me. And so these were the things I was taking into consideration when I was picking out, where I was actually going to live and start building
Yeah.
my home and foundation again.
Yeah. And now, so how many years ago was that you moved back?
It hasn't been that long. I want to say like 2 years.
Okay. And it seems like you found a really great community there. I see you doing your run club all the time and
Yes.
yeah,
I love it. I
good.
absolutely love it here. And I was nervous that I wasn't going to be able to recreate what I had in Bali. I was like, there's nowhere in the States that this exists, but
Yeah.
it is. There
Yeah.
was. And so I'm extremely happy here.
So
Yeah.
we talked about all these big yeses and all these really experiences that allowed you to get to know yourself and know, like you said, your needs and your wants. And I know just from us talking that you're currently in a season of not knowing what's next and kind of sitting in the unknown. And I would love to hear, number one, how you're kind of like nurturing that of like, okay, every day, let me be present and let me just sit and find out what's coming next. What does that look like?
Yeah, it looks like creating a lot more space in my days and in my weeks to explore. About a year into moving back here, I started again feeling that really hard resistance towards things that used to feel fun for me, like creating content. I feel like at heart, I'm a creator. I love, creating things.
Yeah.
It was like everything had been sucked right out of me. I didn't have a single creative thought. I was
Mm.
like, anything creative felt like a complete block. And so, from other experiences of this and just my own journey and what I have been learning, um, I kind of realized this wasn't going to be something I was going to be able to force my way out of or work my way through. I
Mm.
kind of had to just give myself the space and trust and have faith that something would come out the other side, or I would come back to myself. Because at the time, especially because I identify so much with being a creator, I didn't feel like myself, not creating or being involved in anything, right? Like
Yeah.
if like an identity death where I was like,
Mm.
I just don't feel like me, my drive, my ambition. I'm also someone that tends to, have a lot of goals and aspirations and go after things. And I didn't feel like doing any of it.
Yeah.
So I took a year really like with no goals, which
Wow.
sounds even weird to say out loud. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily like the sound of that, but no real goals
Yeah.
other than to be,
Mm.
like to just allow myself to be, to nurture my relationships.
Mm.
So these were like new friendships that I had created here, nurture my familial relationships. I had been away for 2 years, so
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of them for those
Yeah.
2 years. And then lo and behold, my partner now came
Hmm.
into my life in that year as well.
Yeah.
And so I was really focused on nurturing that relationship too. And so in shifting focus of not being so goal ambition oriented, I allowed myself to connect. I connected with others. I connected with myself. And this might sound weird, but it ended up being like a very younger version of me
Hmm.
where I found myself drawn to like things I liked to do when I was a little girl. Like I
Hmm.
started liking pink more and I would dance more and I would just, just be goofier again. And
Yeah.
that's who I was as a little girl. I was very silly.
You and I just talked about the book, The Artist's Way. And
Yeah.
in the first few chapters, so you'll read it soon, she talks about connecting with like pretty much your inner child, but all the things that you love to do that were creative as a young person, a lot of us stopped doing. Like I just started like buying coloring books and it's so relaxing. And I'm like, why did we ever stop just doing these like mindless things that are so creative?
So true. And I love that with the coloring book.
Yeah.
I started like getting paints and painting
Yeah.
things or like making little home things around the house. It's so true. We like forget that inner child, and I definitely did.
Yeah.
Um, so bringing that up again, and that journey also led me in reconnecting with God.
Hmm.
So whatever, you want to call it, God, the divine source. For me, God has always landed. But I really had not had that relationship for years, like
Mm.
maybe even a decade long. I've always been spiritual, let's say.
Yeah.
But I found myself drawn to prayer more. I found myself drawn to more conversations with the divine. And through that year, um, eventually, really just out of pure faith and trust,
Yeah.
little parts of my spark started to come back.
Mm.
Little parts of my creativity and my drive started to come back. And so nurturing it really looked like taking that year and being okay with a pause.
Mm-hmm.
Which someone who you can probably relate to this, maybe the women who listen to this too are achievers, go-getters,
Yeah.
ambitious women, feels so counterintuitive.
Yeah. Yeah. But we
Yeah.
need the space because I think our brains are just go, go, go with not only like our own ideas, but with comparison and social media. And if you have kids, like your brain is so busy all the time. Like that's such a gift to be able to just take a year and be.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that's definitely something I don't take for granted too. The fact that I was able to do that.
Yeah.
I found a coaching company that I
Okay.
align with, and started working with a team of women and her business. So, as a coach on her team.
Yeah.
And so, doing that allowed me some of that stability, like
Yeah.
financial stability, to be
Yeah.
able to take a pause and, feel safe, feel like everything was okay, without the pressure of needing
Right.
to perform or
Yeah.
provide.
Yeah.
So I want to put that out there too, that that was the reason why that I was able to do that.
Yeah.
But such a blessing. And like you said, we can be filled with so much of the external noise,
Yeah.
comparison, and just losing our own voice. So the pause and stillness helped me hear my own voice again.
Mm-hmm. You've said multiple times that you've taken so much time to just get to know yourself, and the fact that you can make decisions just based on what you said, like that download or what someone called like discernment. What advice do you have for women who feel like I'm not good at decision making? I don't know myself well. Like, how, in busy everyday life, how do I take time to actually do that?
There's two parts: hear your voice, and then trust your decision making
Mm.
in ways where the consequences aren't too big.
Yeah.
So one of the best ways I know to get familiar with my voice is writing. That's always kind of been one of my methods. So I think there's something to be said about just keeping some kind of daily small practice of
Yeah.
writing down your thoughts, writing down, what it is that you want that day, how you're feeling that day, anything like that, just so you start to get familiar with the landscape of your mind and the way your thoughts go. Um, and then with the decision making, it can be like trusting yourself to decide what to make for dinner, right? It's like we can spend like hours like, oh, am I going to have this or that? Like, what about one day you just go with your first instinct?
Yeah.
It happens. The worst, right? The risk is low.
Yeah. Yeah.
Worst, you're going to have a dinner that you don't like.
Right. It's
Uh,
funny that you said start with the small stuff because I feel like that's where I struggle. Like, I trust myself in business decisions and motherhood, but trusting myself to get up in the morning to go to the gym or trusting myself to like eat the meal that I prepped instead of like ordering DoorDash. It's like the smaller stuff for some reason is the hardest.
okay. Practice keeping the small promises that you make to yourself.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, and when you do that, you build that integrity with your word,
Yeah.
right? And so I would pick like one of those instead of
Yeah.
trying to do it all at once. Pick one. It helps with accountability,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like and that could just mean like tell your husband, tell your friend, your roommate that you live in, like, hey, I'm trying to build this skill,
Mm, yeah.
trying to build this self-trust. And this is the way that I'm experimenting for this week. I want to get up and go to the gym by 7 a.m. I'm just looking for a little bit of that accountability and support. And then that's almost like the training wheels to start, right? To
Yeah.
get the push going. And then eventually you'll build that for yourself too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's smart. Talk to me now. I know you said that like over that first year you had this creative block and you didn't know what was next and you kind of just sat and really listened to yourself. And now do you feel like you have an inkling of what's next, or are you still just like enjoying the ride of waiting it out and seeing what comes?
A little bit of both. I
Yeah.
feel a little more clear. I am creating more again. I'm exploring like video editing a little bit more. I'm exploring storytelling, like how to convey a compelling story
Yeah.
on the topic of health, women's health and fitness, right? Like keeping that as the crux of my messaging, but the way that
Yeah.
I kind of convey that information. And so I'm still building it, and it doesn't have like it hasn't manifested in full form, but we're
Yeah.
definitely out the trenches, you know.
Good. Good.
We're getting there.
Yeah. And I mean, you're so well spoken about your entire journey. And I feel like whatever you create next, every yes that you've said or everything that you've learned from each of those experiences, just going to support it that much more and make it that much better, whatever comes next.
Thank you. That means so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I like, knowing each other for almost a decade now, I've just loved seeing, for me, it just feels like bravery to be able to leave what you're used to and move across the world and start your own business. Like there's so many points where you did things that a lot of people are scared to do. And now you just get to like reap the benefits of everything that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's also been an honor to just witness you from afar I can't believe it's been a decade,
I
but
know, isn't that crazy?
you've always been a powerhouse. You've always been an inspiration to me. So
Thank
I
you.
am honored to be on here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of If I Hadn't Said Yes. If this episode inspired, encouraged, or moved you in any way, your rating and review would be greatly appreciated. Or maybe this episode made you think of someone in your life that you want to encourage to go for their big yes. Feel free to share it with a friend. You can keep up with all of our content at If I Hadn't Said Yes Pod on Instagram. We'll see you next week.